Dear colleagues, good morning, good day, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching us, listening to us. I welcome you to the newest installment of the Riga Security Forum 2021. My name is Karlis Bukovskis. I am researcher and the Deputy Director of the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, who has the honor to be hosting this virtual podcast event. Today we're going to have a discussion entitled European Foreign and Security Policy, Challenges and Developments, and we have a wonderful, excellent expert with us who's going to try to answer all my questions, some of them tricky, some of them less. We have Professor Dr. Sandra Fernandes from the University of Minho in Braga in Portugal, and she's also a researcher there at the Research Institute. Sandra, welcome and thank you for agreeing to be with us today.
Good morning, Karlis. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and congratulations for having my name right in a correct Portuguese pronunciation. It's excellent.
Well, I was practicing that yesterday evening. Sandra, if we may start immediately with the issues that are on the table, which are more topical issues, but let's go with the if we speak about Portugal, if we speak about the Baltic states, we're small countries, right? What is common between us? How the common foreign and security policy affect us? How do we express ourselves within the broader European foreign policy framework?
Yes, it's quite interesting that both of us are sitting here today. You from Latvia and me from Portugal, the extreme peripheries of the European Union. And at the first sight, it could seem that we are we are very distant. But we share a lot in terms of, despite this geographical setting, we share a lot geopolitically, starting from the importance of the Atlantic Alliance for our countries and the consequences of the Brexit in terms of our rationale as EU and NATO member states. So the first thing I would say is that small peripheral countries like Latvia and Portugal, even though our geopolitical interests are not the same, share a big interest in keeping security and defense policies as a collective endeavor at the NATO level and at the EU level. And in a moment when the transatlantic relationship is not stable, is not guaranteed. Let's see what happened with Australia recently. It is quite adamant for our countries to keep dynamism in all these initiatives in the big, broader context of common and foreign security policy. That talking only about common points. Of course, we can talk also about points that are not so common between these two countries.
Well, most of the European Union member states are small countries. We're sometimes, in everyday lives forgetting that we are small countries. And we tend to have different interests. We tend to have different approaches to things. How far can we afford having differences in our opinion on the global processes? Which issues would you say we have to have a common understanding from the very beginning? Which should be our red lines as common red lines for all the small member states of the European Union?
But I think that the answer to this question is just happening under our eyes. We are witnessing key changes in world politics. The distanciation and confrontation with Russia is so crucial. We are in Europe. This is our biggest neighbor. We need to engage in a constructive manner and also in a manner that defends interests on the European Union side. There is the shift of the United States that cares about allies, but also cares about its own interests and is really worried about the Pacific. These agendas are quite difficult because, as you say, there are a lot of small member states and there are big member states. And the history has taught Europe that the dominance of big member states is something that has not brought peace but conflict in Europe. So the European Union is an opportunity to manage these questions, and the strive for unity, I think, is there are some positive aspects, like sanctions policies. Sanctions are adopted under the unanimity procedure. And the fact that the European Union has been able to adopt sanctions, namely to point at Russia's decisions and policies, is something very important. Even if we can criticize sanctions, what are the effects of sanctions? But at least they have one effect. They create unity. They create at least a basic common understanding about the situation. Is this strategic unity? Is this strategic thinking? No, but it's a step towards it.
Talking about strategic partnerships and strategic unities, the Baltic States and Portugal have one partner which is rather common to both of us, well, meaning in this case the United States of America and our transatlantic links. First of all, how would you describe how similar and why so similar are the Baltic and Portuguese interests? As you were pointing out, we're kind of in different extremes of periphery, so to speak, but we still have this common concerns and common interests and common partners. And the second, related to this immediately, would be about, we also had another partner, which, well, Portugal had several centuries of long relationship. In the case of the Baltic states, it was an instrumental partner for us when we were acquiring independence 100 years ago. I'm of course talking about the United Kingdom, I'm of course talking about Britain, and I'm talking about Brexit. So United States as our main partner and losing United Kingdom as our partner within the European Union. How should it and how has it affected our outlook on the common foreign security policy and our security issues in general?
Well, starting from Portugal and then going to the broader EU level, starting from Portugal, it's an earthquake in terms of national interests and defending our national interests. Portugal is absolutely not interested in losing this partnership, this link. Portugal understands that it needs to be rethought, it needs to be recreated, but absolutely no way of losing this strategic link to the sea powers. Let's return to more classical geopolitical terms, in the sense that. For different reasons, but one of the common point between Latvia, for instance, and Portugal is the need to be aware of the continental powers in Europe and the alliance with countries that is a sea power and not a continental European power is important for a small country to keep advancing sovereign interests. And it's, as I'm putting it, it looks really classical, but it's there, it's history, and it's still very present in the identity, foreign policy identity of these small countries we are talking about. And Brexit, in terms of defense, is really problematic because all that the EU has been doing since the Treaty of Maastricht in the 90s, it was about the UK-French partnership to be the core, the driver of the building of the European defense. And now that the UK is out, what is left? So it's the leaning on Germany, and also the role of the small states is even more important. And we can see it in the more recent initiatives, the permanent structured cooperation, the European defense funds that are just being launched in terms of the calls in spring. These initiatives are really meant to try to make more pooling and to bring small and big states together. Because what is the problem if we talk about defense and European defense is this the problem of the small countries seeing the big countries defending their economic interests, the big companies. Okay, what is their place? Okay, the small countries, so a small country like Portugal doesn't want to hammer the nails. It wants to be a producer in a chain of value, to add value, and also for its economy. And in a context of pandemics, it's even more important, the recovery. So the role of the defense industry for the recovery of the country is key. But politically, there is always this, the small countries are really worried about the fact that big countries will advance their companies. And at the end of the day, what is left?
So would you say that now actually losing one of the big countries is more beneficial for small countries in the European Union?
I think it has been beneficial at the beginning in the sense of a wake-up call. So basically it was, I said an earthquake, so basically the EU really understood in a very harsh manner that it really needed to do something for itself because of the loss of importance that could come from there. Certainly. And again, I think that the recent crisis since September between French, British and Americans concerning the cancellation of the submarine purchase from Australia to France is, I think, another piece of the puzzle that just confirms that the attention of the United States is elsewhere. And also that the interests, economic and strategic interests go together, is going elsewhere. So I think, yes, politically, it has motivated a more urgency in the willingness to make progress in the front of foreign policy and defense.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of the whole AUKUS situation and cancellation of the French deliveries of the submarines is hurting French a lot. I remember a few years ago we were talking about the Mistral ships which France was trying to sell to Russia, and in this case the whole NATO stood up and said no, well please don't do that. How do you think the French will be acting and will be feeling? What could be their next plan? Because they're losing from one or other reason their original military contracts.
Yes, it's interesting that it's happening with France, precisely because, as we all know, France historically has been in two positions. It has been the first proponent for a European defense since the 50s, and at the same time, it has been a fierce. France has a lot of doubts about the reliability of the United States and the UK. And when the UK wanted to be a member state, France, the main condition that France had was really to understand how much the UK would be committed to Europe instead of to the interests of the United States. So it's interesting that it's happening with France. And I guess that France, of course, France is also going through a harsh economic crisis in the context of the pandemics. But I think that it can probably trigger even more willingness to lead advancements in foreign and defense policy for the European Union. Again, it's a crisis. It's a diplomatic crisis. It's a deep one that is happening because of the AUKUS situation.
Talking about diplomatic crises and crises in general, one of the reasons why we keep having one crisis after another, at least in almost the last 10 years, is of course our eastern neighbor. And when I say our, I mean both the Baltic and the Portuguese eastern neighbor, the largest one that we have next to our borders. Of course, I'm talking about the Russian Federation. How would you describe the Baltic? Well, the Baltic position on Russian Federation, of course, is rather well known, right? It usually comes from the position of vulnerabilities and small states defending their sovereignty and interests. How would you describe the Portuguese attitude towards Russia? Because you don't have Russia as an immediate threat, at least not in your perception, as far as I am concerned.
Yeah, you're totally right, Karlis. In fact, Russia is not in our geography, and it's not in our direct geopolitical interest either. And it's interesting because Portugal just finished the presidency of the Council of the European Union, and so we had the first semester of this year, and I had the privilege to be involved in part of the program concerning Russia, and I could accompany the framing of the program. It was at the end of the presidency. It's an event that was organized in Moscow with the presidencies, and for the first time in years, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov accepted his invitation to come. So Lavrov was there. under Portuguese auspices. And it's quite telling about our relationship with Russia. We have good relationships with Russia. Portugal is adamant to be a diplomatic bridge to the global world, inclusive to difficult partners, China, Russia. So Portugal is basically really playing the card of solidarity, which is a card that is really a driver right now of what the EU can do more as an integrative project. So solidarity means what? Means that Portugal has no issues with Russia. Portugal would be even interested in having more trade relationships with Russia, but being solidar and understanding that others have different issues and security issues, which is the case of the Baltics with Russia, Portugal aligns with sanctions, for instance, with a united, let's say, front in front of Russia. So that is the position of Portugal. But that being said, Portugal also expects that countries like Latvia would also support Portugal in strengthening EU interest in Africa. Okay, so this is not for free. This solidarity coin is meant also to bring at the EU table, to put the light on other geographies and interests where Portugal would like to see more policies, more approximation. And let's mention as well the case of migration. Portugal has not been in the root of the crisis, the root of the human flows and the dramatic situations of human beings trying to cross the borders to the EU, but it can happen in the near future. Okay, even if we consider that what is happening in Belarus is an instrumentalization, we could see situations like this also at the direct border of Portugal, which has not been the case, as we know. The routes are more Spain, Italy, Greece, but it could happen as well. And in that case, Portugal would really like to see more EU engagement in Africa.
So in this case, we all have to keep in mind that solidarity must never be only one-way process, right? So we cannot expect. Now, turning to the second question, which I wanted to discuss out of the three, which I wanted to discuss with you, is of course dealing with Russia. We have been already mentioning it a couple of times, but Russia has for the European Union and for most of its member states and for the Western countries in general, Russia in the last 10 years has basically went from friend to foe. And of course, with the insurgents in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, and occupation of Crimea, that is of course the moment. What was the watershed moment in the relations? But how would you describe how would you explain the whole interaction between the West and Russia 10 years ago, and how it has evolved over these 10 years, and what is the state of play now in your mind?
I would say that from the Western point of view, there was a lot of wishful thinking for years, in the sense that this all liberal idea that institutional engagement with Russia and the creation of cooperative institutions would anyway end up into democratization of Russia and approximation and creation and policies around common interests. And it proved to be wrong to think like this, because the result is not there. And the question, if you would allow me to rephrase the question, is what went wrong? If we had this structure of cooperation, even at the NATO level, the Russian NATO Council, okay, what went wrong? I think that what went wrong is that I think the West did not read Russia right, did not understand exactly what was happening in terms of transformation in Russia, and what was the course of transformation in Russia that clearly President Putin addressed and curved towards another direction. And I think this wishful thinking and not reading Russia right was quite harmful for the policies. I think we could have managed the relationship with Russia differently. I would say respecting a bit more Russian interest, but at the same time understanding that we were not, it was not about a cooperation towards convergence it was not the case, because it was not the intention at the beginning. So, and I remember some key discourses of leaders at the NATO level, for instance, that for me were already interpelling. Back to the 2000s, the first decade, and even the 2010s early years, that basically Russia should adapt or stay there. And in a kind of, it was, I think it was really wishful thinking. I'm sorry to say that, but and I think that we need to rethink what are the effects of institutions internationally, and if they really produce convergence, we need to think differently. I think creative politics are really needed today.
As far as I understood, then. What you're saying is that Russia, well, West had expectations towards Russia. There were ideas how the relationship should be taking place, but it's the West side. Can we play a little bit of a devil's advocate in this case and look at the Russia's side? Because from the Russian perspective, how do you see why Russia has been acting the way it has been acting in its foreign policy and its security policy for the last well, 7 to 10 years?
Well, Karlis, as you mentioned,
is Russia, would you say that Russia also feels disappointed in the relationship with the West, that it didn't work out, or there is another outlook on the problem?
I think that Russia feels that it has not been understood for all these years. And as you mentioned, I'm a researcher, so I will give maybe a boring answer to the audience, but please allow me to underline that when you study international politics, it's really difficult to understand international politics without emotions, without identity. Because international politics are made by persons, by human beings. Of course, they represent institutions, but history, identity are there. And as you know, that for Russia, history, historical memory, and respect for it are key for a national pride and also development. So prestige, recognition, respect from the outside are keys that Russia has not been considers, that are not been happening. So Russia now strives for the respect that Russia thinks deserves, and the West has not been giving to Russia. And all this is now in a narrative that is really clear in the new Russian security strategy that has been released in July, on the 2nd of July of this year. This new Russian security strategy is really, well, I'm sorry, but in my reading, it's depressing. What are we going to do with this mindset? It's really difficult. Russia feels that it's threatened from all over the places, and it's really inward looking. You have almost no references to cooperation. It's really confrontational. It's making Russia ready to defend its interests and its orthodoxy. Russia doesn't put into question in this strategy the liberal values. It just says that they are the real, they are the beacon, let's say, of traditional values, and they need to defend them. So this is the point of the situation. It's quite serious because it has to do with these feelings of not being respected, which add, of course, to material interests and geopolitics, of course. This is not out of the picture, but this is how I would frame it.
Sure. Using your own words, and just for me to be clear on this, do you mean that while reading the documents, the Russian security strategy, the new one, you are worried that it has a depressing mindset or it has a confrontational mindset?
Now, it's depressive for my mind, and it's a confrontational in the Russian mind. Okay, so it's depressive for me that would like to see more stability on the European continent, that would like to see a workable relationship with Russia. We don't have any alternative to engaging with Russia. We are neighbors. So it's depressing for me as an analyst, as a reader, because it shows how far away we are drifting from each other in the same continent.
Okay, so Russia feels optimistic about confronting other countries in the world. That would be the other way how to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it can be your interpretation and the interpretation of many others, but I think that what is a fact is that the document is confrontational. It's I think there is quite consensus on this reading of the document. The document is confrontational. It's not a document that looks for bridges and for engaging with. It's really about, okay, now it's our turn to be ourselves and to defend ourselves against several enemies, and the main enemy is the United States and its allies.
Okay, so with this, I would like to actually turn to the third question, which I wanted to ask you about the strategic autonomy of the European strategic autonomy. Because if we are speaking about Russia being confrontational, Russia being inward-looking, if we're looking at the fact that Russia is feeling like it is being threatened, European strategic autonomy, isn't this also a bit of starting to remind of the same pattern of thinking about the world, about Europe's position in the world, about Europe's own safety in the world? How would you say what the European strategic autonomy is about?
Well, we are supposed to discover it very soon, in January, at the beginning of next year, because arguably the European Union is engaging in producing a strategic compass, right? It has been launched by the German presidency last year, and it's supposed to be finalized and presented publicly at the beginning of next year. So the strategic compass. Your question is really a key question, Karlis, because strategy is to serve a foreign policy, and in a foreign policy, you need to identify what are the threats, what is the strategic environment where you are, and what are the goals. So strategy is meant to serve a policy, a foreign policy. And I'm sorry to say that at the right moment, as we can see, it's very difficult and the pandemic has shown us that we don't have enough definition of what are our priorities, what are our threats, and even more deeply, what is the European Union as the security actor? European Union is not a state. Okay? What are going to be the common denominators that the strategy will serve? So there is a lot of doctrinal work to do from the EU side in a context that is a real moving target. It's really challenging because our traditional allies, the UK and the US, are also repositioning themselves outside of Europe. So it's, I would say honestly, that it's probably the most challenging time for the European Union in terms of external action. It's really happening now. So I think we are all very expectant about what will be the strategic compass. But anyway, the issues are really big. It's not only Russia, it's China, it's migration, it's climate. It's even the future of the European Union as a project. What we as a society, as values, how we defend our model in front of all the pressures from inside and from outside that are happening. So the strategic compass I think it will come with some definitions, but I hope it will be really clear in terms of a compromise of all the EU member states of what the EU wants to be and how the EU will defend its model and its values also at the global level. So it's a really complex exercise, and if we miss the first premises, which are related with having firstly a foreign policy and foreign policy goals for all the member states, it's difficult to have a clear strategy. Strategy for what?
So in this case, what I'm listening and hearing is that to some extent what is driving Russia, it's again inward lookingness and attempts to protect itself against the external influences. Is just that they see the West and they have been shifting in this way in the last 10 years. It also sounds like European Union to a large extent, because of the US, especially the previous administration, because of Russia's policies, because of rising China's power, because of all the other problems that you were mentioning, European Union is also starting to look more inward. European Union is also starting to be more cautious and starting to realize its vulnerabilities. So would you agree if I say that in the last 10 years, European Union, its common foreign and security policy, has moved from being very open to the world to now starting to realize more of its vulnerabilities and looking inward and starting to protect itself, to actually starting building the thing which was once called Fortress Europe?
Well, as an Euro-optimist myself, I would prefer to disagree with you on that, in the sense that I would say that the hurdles, the crisis, the economic crisis, financial crisis, the pandemics, has put a real strains on the resources available for the ambitions, right? I would say that it's more a problem of resources, plus, of course, some specific member states, if we think about Hungary, for instance, and Poland also, like presenting scenarios that really cut themselves from the basic compromises of being a new member state in terms of values, political values. But I would say it's more about the fact that the EU is lacking resources for ambitions. I would not say that the ambitions are not there. I would not say that the EU is closing into itself. Let's take the example of the climate summit that has just happened and closed. The EU is a global leader on climate. And this agenda has really been impacted by the role of the EU as a whole. And also, if you look at the World Trade Organization and the fact that the EU is there as a member in full capacity has also been very important to keep away too much protectionism. And in fact, during the Trump administration, it has been the case. So no, I would be more optimistic. I would say that I would blame the lack of resources and the strengths. So the national appeal, so the appeal of the member states to go back to national perspectives and positions, of course, is there. But I think that when there are problems, all member states understand that it's better to act together at the EU level instead of acting at the national level. I think the crises have shown that, at least historically, crises have been cement to the EU and not disunity in the EU. So I would guess that when there are problems and crises, EU member states understand that the national way is not the good way. It's better to act at the EU level.
With this positive remark and positive outlook, evidently you have more positive outlook towards the European Union's position and future of the common foreign security policy than maybe I have at this point. But I believe we will all pick up at one point when we're going to start seeing the results of the strategic compass of the. We're going to start seeing the results of the EU decision making, and our lives are going to become more predictable and more with a very positive outlook. So I wanted to thank you, Professor Sandra Fernandes, for the wonderful interview, for this discussion. It was truly an honor and pleasure of mine to be hosting you at this Riga Security Forum episode. I wish you all the best. I wish all the best to the European Union, of course, and its common foreign security policy, and looking forward to working with you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon. And congratulations for the forum. It has been quite dynamic and very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.